Hello, this is Michael Hexter. Welcome to Politics 2100 here on YouTube. So, this episode I'm calling Physical Violence and Intimidation is a critical, quote unquote, force multiplier for the GOP, the right wing fascists, fascist. So, I am here kind of repeating some of the things I said in the last video, but I'm refocusing them on the definition of fascism and the definition of the far right, and how the different elements of that definition, as offered, for instance, by people like Jason Stanley or Ruth Ben Ghiat, I think is that how he pronounced her name. Anyway, some of the people who study authoritarianism and fascism and who are appearing in the media occasionally. But also, this is a critical element for pointing out, or critical missing element to the sort of standard press coverage of the GOP and of this ongoing veiling / PR, free PR campaign done by the media for the right wing. Because it's something that is underplayed by that in that presentation of the GOP as being a respectable political party and as being part of a sort of a community of sage Washington insiders who can be brought on to TV or write or op-eds can be written in places like the New York Times or Washington Post that glance over this element that I'm describing, or that minimize it, or alternatively that make it part of a moral failing rather than part of a political strategy. So it is a moral failing of these people, or it is a virtue, and moral in the sense of virtue. It's a non-virtue according to the standard Beltway, inside the Beltway consensus, to be violent, to be intimidating other people. So it's considered to be a non-virtue, but virtue is something that's applied to individuals. So what I'm trying to say is it's part of a strategy and tactic as well. So it actually has uses. It's not simply a sign of some kind of fallen state or fall from grace of politicians like Donald Trump, or they're a deviation from what would be ideal for them to do. That it's more or it is also, it can be viewed that way, but it has uses for fascists and for the GOP, and those uses, which I pointed out to in the previous video, involve intimidating their opponents, and that intimidation is what I'm calling here a force multiplier. So what all fascists have endeavored to do throughout their, let's say, 100-year history or so of fascism, basically with World War I being pretty much the beginning of fascism as a movement or as a political ideology, that they are attempting to achieve state power via a minority by democratic means, or by, if they use democratic means, to then quickly discard the democratic means as simply a means to their ends, as something that's inessential to their lofty goals, the mythical reinstatement of either an individual or a myth about the nation that dictates certain changes in laws and also certain violent activities, often or almost always violent activities that involve national self-purification or assertion of grandeur or subjugation of other peoples outside the boundaries of the nation, or again I said purification of people inside the nation. So anyway, the democratic means or whatever, the elections are just simply things to be used as a mere tool to them higher end of just getting power by any means necessary. So the violence and the intimidation is a force multiplier. And this is something that's been recognized by fascists, the founders of fascism, let's say Mussolini and Hitler, or at least the founding leaders, let's say, in the fascist movement. You had philosophers before then that philosophized about it, but that and so this it means seizing political power as a minority without, not based on popular sovereignty, but based on might making right, and based on a loyalty to a small group of people. It could be, or let's say a subset, a minority subculture within the society, for instance, the middle class, the petite bourgeoisie, or but also for instance, an endangered aristocracy, or in our age, the very wealthy. But in our current versions of fascism, those people are hidden from view. They're not considered to be, or let's say they're hidden in plain sight, in that some of the leaders of the fascist movement claim to be of that class, like Donald Trump. But anyway, they claim to be protecting a better sort of person. Okay, so this is the typical reactionary project, is that they are standing up for a better sort of person. So the better sort of person is almost by nature a minority of the population. It could be a large minority, could be a very small minority. But anyway, and that they need to be protected, their rights need to be protected. So so fascists need to have a force multiplier, have a way to, beyond votes, beyond the one person, one vote standard, they need to create a political politics that that gets rid of that, or that supersedes the one person, one vote standard. And we see this very clearly in the United States today, in that we have people who say that they feel they're so entitled to controlling government that they could ignore and erase votes, and they can change votes as they wish because they represent this better sort of person. And violence and intimidation are one part of their force multiplication efforts, so that they can, and this is, so Donald Trump recognized this in his quest for power in 2015 or so, and so forth and so on, that it's something, he recognized it maybe by nature, by the fact of his own personality, his own thuggish mobster type of personality, that he saw that basically physical intimidation would be ways to increase his power, increase his ability to manipulate other people and manipulate the politics, and also sensing, I think correctly, that his opponents were very shy, and this is where his cunning comes through, or were very easily intimidated and were cowards, okay? Also part of his own party were cowards. In other words, that the GOP is filled with enormous cowards as well, so who quake in their boots. But they show to the world, and they show to the Democrats, a bravado or false front of being rough, tough individuals. And this is part of this false front is part of the bravado and machismo and phallic posing, or this deadly phallus waving, this gun waving culture that we have in the United States. It predates, this current upswelling of neo-fascism in the United States and Trumpism and post-Trumpism. But that is it's part of the formula that Trump recognized, I think, intuitively in his quest for power, and he gravitated toward and cultivated those people who were tended to try to increase their own personal power by showing weapons, by having menacing exteriors. So by having tattoos and by being, I mean, I'm not saying everybody has a tattoo is like this, but just having a gruff, macho, and it could be women who have the same approach. So, but it's mostly men who are attracted to this and who engage in this, but and including in their choice of vehicles. We have in the United States a whole auto industry that has been built up around. It's not the only auto industry that I mean, Japanese and German automakers also trade in a certain type of menace, but the United States, it's particularly large and particularly over large vehicles that are high and tall and have menacing large grills and so forth and so on. So anyway, so all of this is a culture of, this may seem like trivial, but a culture of threat and of intimidation, okay? And a culture in which individuals are supposed to, so adopting that and seeing that as a precondition, fascists like Donald Trump and also others see that this is their constituency in part, people who are grasping for power by any means necessary, including by any means that they have at their disposal, including their ownership of certain types of vehicles, and then also, and use of those vehicles, their presentation of a certain, people could call it a, whatever, habitus, I don't know, it's a fancy word, but anyway, just a certain kind of mean or self-presentation to the world of being larger than life and threatening and loud, and but also own gun ownership as being one of the key factors, and the deadliness. And in fact, that is the crucial thing, because that trumps all of those other things in terms of the ability to actually be deadly and to impose your will by threatening other people, by pointing a gun at them, or by suggesting that you have a gun and therefore they should listen to you, therefore they shouldn't challenge you. And so anyway, so this force multiplier is perfect for the project of fascism, basically seizing state power through a minority group for the benefit of a minority group. So a smaller group of vanguard, you could say it's a vanguard, okay? A vanguard, that is, even though they're not organized like the whatever vanguards of the left wing, the Marxist Leninist vanguards, but anyway, they are it is a reaction to fascism is in part a political movement that absorbed some of the lessons of Leninism by observation and as a counter movement. And so in some sense, this is also the vanguard of fascism, is about exactly these displays of threatening exteriors, death-related, quasi-military. So another explanation for it, or another way to look at it, is that this is the bringing in of military forms of threat, or exaggerated and elaborated symbols of death, like the death's head of the SS and so forth and so on. But anyway, creating a culture where you are creating threats and magnifying your power by creating a sense of menace about you and your group against other groups. And so in the other video, I was talking about, well, so people have a choice about what they're going to do when they're confronted with people like this. And that's what I was trying to emphasize there. So I'm not stating this as this is that one needs to submit to this particular type of form of intimidation, especially before these people seize state power. So, and this is where we're in a critical moment where they could seize state power or in via, in part, legal means, but in part using intimidation, which is not illegal to intimidate other people by certain means. It's illegal to intimidate them by some other means, but there's the mixture of both the legal and the illegal means. There's that the fascists use. So the Democrats would need to be prosecuting and pursuing to the fullest extent the illegal means of intimidation and also violence, and also creating new laws that crack down on those things. Meanwhile, while the fascists want to enlarge that sphere, this includes gun control laws and so forth and so on. So even the perverseness of the GOP in its worship of guns, and it is perverse, it is anti-moral and disgusting and self-destructive ultimately, but it is in pursuit of a kind of power, individual, selfish power grab kind of power that, for instance, we have GOP lawmakers saying that they would shoot their own grandchildren to protect them. So we had with that recently in a ridiculous a statement and sort of almost the proof positive of the craziness of the gun cult in the United States and also within the GOP, that this woman, this grandmother, was saying she would shoot her own grandchildren to protect them, and people are giving her the benefit of the doubt and saying, well, she must have slipped, her tongue must have slipped. Well, it didn't. It was a power praxis. It was a Freudian slip, in the sense that she was admitting to the cult-like status of the gun within, and the reason why it has that status, it's because prior to this movement of fascists, coming together, it was certainly a statement of people in the United States who feel vulnerable and feel disenfranchised, asserting that they have this power because they own a gun and so forth and so on, and that they, and it's a dysfunctional and it's the wrong kind of assertion of personal power, but they saw it as their only hope for. It's a statement of identity, statement of defensive, to them, defensive offense in saying they own a gun and they will go and kill people if they suggest that they will create a law that might make it harder for other people to buy guns. So anyway, so you have that culture prior, and now you have this movement that's organized itself with the help of the NRA, among other groups, and around gun ownership and around stochastic terrorism as a element of a political movement. Okay, even though some of those stochastic terrorists are just people who are paranoid schizophrenics, or maybe people like that. I don't have the diagnosis. You don't have to necessarily qualify for that diagnosis per se, but who have a certain type of. That's not, again, not all mental illnesses are dangers to other people, but the particular spectrum that are dangers, including the paranoid spectrum and parts of the paranoid spectrum, and also parts of the let's say sociopathic, psychopathic groups who are prone to violence and prone to harming others and not caring about the welfare of others. And so anyway, you now have an organized movement that's using that, and that is a use of those mental illnesses and that type of personality to or if not personality, at least configuration of whatever constellation of different mental problems and mental challenges that can be funneled and manipulated by propaganda into creating this kind of a movement of unorganized terrorists. Okay, or semi-organized terrorists. So so anyway, um, this, I think it's critical to focus on this. It may seem extremely obvious what I'm saying, but I'm saying there are choices that people have. Again, the most important point I'm making is this needs to be noticed and understood. It should be published by channels that are much larger than mine, and it should be focused on, but also focused on as something you have a choice as an opponent to that, to respond differently to it, to not be afraid of it, or to be only afraid of it insofar as it threatens you in any given moment, but to specifically and definitely not in a generalized kind of way, to focus on the specifics of when you specifically should be afraid, but to work to understand the threat and the acts of intimidation, point them out, make them part of public discourse, and use, if you have still the powers of government. Unfortunately, the Democrats have been failing 90% of the time on this, to use the powers of government to crack down on the threat to democracy, the threat to public health, the threat to bodily integrity, the threat to a pluralistic, democratic, common life world. You could say that should exist in the United States, that should be part of our common polity, our common our society overall, our civilization. Those threats should be recognized and should be pushed aside, combated, minimized, and potentially also eliminated by changes in laws, by enforcement of laws, and by creation of new realities that make those threat displays and threatening behavior and actual violence makes those obsolete, makes those seem unattractive and counter to what are the core American values, okay, and what are core values of democracy, freedom, and common, and this, and adding my thing, a sustainable stewardship of the wealth of the U.S. The U.S. territory, the North American territory, in which we unfortunately stole from other peoples, but that we would create a more sustainable way to live on that, and including the global, taking care in part also of the global commons that has been severely damaged by our activity. The global atmospheric commons and also oceanic commons, and that needs to happen very soon for us to survive, okay, as a species. Anyway, so I hope this presentation is helpful to some people. Please share in the comments, what you think of it. I'm trying to, as I say, sharpen and focus people's minds on critical elements of what might seem obvious to you once I say it, but I think is not entirely obvious in the way our public discourse is structured about these topics. So anyway, please share your comments. Please like this video if you liked it, and also please subscribe to Politics 2100 so you will know when the next video comes up. Okay, see you soon.